Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Grand Torino. Delighted to have everybody on board here today. Just trying to go through a few visuals, make sure everybody's on board and connected. We'll do a quick live check. I can see the stream starting to pick up on the far side. Live chat is going bananas, as you could expect. I don't see any lag there. Looks live. We should be broadcasting somewhere. I don't see anything. Sorry guys, I'm in a bit of a twilight here. Just bear with me, Dr. Corsi. I don't see anything happening here in the live chat. Coffee and freedom. Damn it. I am streaming, but I don't see where.
Yeah, it's good. We hear you fine.
Good.
Sounds like a lively coffee shop down there, Charles.
Yeah, it's just on Starbucks. The people here are very nice with the waiters, but the crowd is a little interesting.
Well, you've lived in the village a long time.
I mean, this crowd would be very comfortable voting in Russia.
Okay, guys.
Maybe they do.
I think we are broadcasting. Hello and good evening and welcome. I do believe we are broadcasting now. Very delighted to have two important guests with me here today. Dr. Jerome CORSI and Mr. Charles Ortel. Gentlemen, how are you? Good evening. Or good morning, I should say.
Doing great, thank you.
We have a small broadcast here just to display and talk to you about a few things. I'd just like to introduce Dr. CORSI first. Dr. CORSI is a #1 best-selling author. Does great work. We became acquainted through the 24/7 live stream, and Dr. CORSI has a new book out called "The Killing of the Deep State." I just wanted to, by way of introduction, just get that message out. And Charles Ortel, who does some sterling work, forensics accountant, who does some sterling work and will be revealing to us throughout the conversation the ins and outs of the Clinton Foundation and its involvement here in Ireland. Gentlemen, how are you today?
We're great. Good to be with you.
It's an honor to be on with
you. Charles, your involvement, you have ties back here to Ireland. You worked and had an organisation set up here in Ireland quite some time ago. Can you describe how you came over and your business and the dealings that you've had here and your involvement here in Ireland, please?
Sure. Like most Americans, I also have, like Dr. CORSI, Irish roots. My grandmother was a member of the Gormley family, and indeed my youngest brother is called Gormley as his first name. So I've been traveling to Ireland since 1976. At the firm I work for, Dillon Reed, was chaired by a man called Nicholas Brady, and the senior partner was a fellow called Peter Flanagan. So there were a lot of deep Irish connections where I worked in investment banking. These included to a family called the Rehill, Reihill family, that the branch that I was close to had about roughly 50% of a company called Ted Castles, now known as Top. And I was on the board of that company, and with my contact there, Shane, we set up a company called Hibernia Capital Partners in 1995, and ultimately became the first central bank authorized, which is a tough thing to be the first one through the regulatory process. The first central bank of Ireland authorized private equity fund. We brought 100 million euros into Ireland and made 8 investments. Some were good, some were bad. But through the course of that, I served on multiple boards in Ireland, in England, and other places. And as a guess, I've probably been, because I'd only be guessing, I've probably been to Ireland at least 200 times, maybe more than that. And so I'm quite familiar with your country. And the thesis we had back in 95 through 7 was that Ireland really had a lot more, the people of Ireland might have a lot more potential with the United States because we share, a spirit of entrepreneurship. There have been many great Irish American entrepreneurs who've come over to our country and built up gigantic businesses. There's a lot of friendship, continuing friendship, whatever our government differences may be. The people of America and the people of Ireland are close. And it's sad, frankly, sitting here. Last time I was in Ireland was 2009. It's sad to see the stranglehold that the EU has had. For a while, it helped Ireland, but maybe more recently, it hasn't been so helpful. And I think the EU is heading on a disaster path here, as we're seeing with Brexit and now other countries talking about leaving it. You don't want to be the last person in the EU paying all the bills for all the departed members. So I have great friends in Ireland. I really enjoy my time there, and I'm proud to be associated with you.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Hopeful that your efforts really take off.
Yeah, brilliant, sir. And Dr. Corsi, you have connections here to Ireland as well. You've been sharing with me.
My grandmother was born in the United States. My grandmother and grandfather both came to the United States from Ireland in the 1880s, 1890s. One was from County Mayo, the other was from County Cork. And I'm half Irish, half Italian. So my mother was first generation Irish. My father was first generation Italian. And my grandfather remembered distinctly going back to Ireland about 1957. He lived until the 60s. And it's always been a big part of my life, Ireland and the family. And I've visited Ireland, not nearly as much as Charles and much more as a tourist. But it's a wonderful country, and I love Ireland, and I'm honored to be half Irish.
And we're delighted to have you on board as well. I'd just like to tie in with some of the rhetoric that's come about here. Some of our intelligentsia, a recent professor said here that we're actually closer to Boston than we are to Brussels. And if we could only remember that fact, that it might sway a lot of it, might open our eyes to a lot of the dealings and a lot of what's going on here in this country that I think the majority of people are totally unaware of.
And let me give a little bit of background too, in terms of I've known Charles for a long time in New York. Charles is one of the I'd say top financial analysts and well regarded on Wall Street. He was one of the first to expose the financial weaknesses of problems. So Charles and I started working, I guess, in 2015. Charles mentioned to me we were having a lunch, and he was saying basically, and I looked at the Clinton Foundation financials, and I had not. And Charles at that point said that they were a complete scam. They were a criminal enterprise, and Charles had dug in deeply to them. So in 2005, 2016, I began publishing articles in WorldNet Daily at that time based on Charles's research. And it led to me writing a book in 2016 called Partners in Crime, which was about the Clintons monetizing the White House for personal gain and profit. And a large part of my research came out of Charles's research, and I discussed Charles in the book extensively, so his research is presented. Charles's great strength is his ability to read financial statements and published government filings, and from that to derive an analysis of whether the company is legitimate or not legitimate. And the Clinton Foundation, Charles has maintained from the beginning, is a massive criminal fraud. And what we're going to discuss today, and I want Charles, I'm going to do this introduction so Charles has the floor for most of the discussion, and that is to present his research largely on O'Brien and the involvement of Ireland in the Clinton Foundation scam. And it's It's quite a story. It's shocking actually. And Gran Torino, I think we're all indebted to you to get the opportunity to get this information into Ireland in a way that people need to understand. Literally, the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been stolen by the Clinton Foundation from uh, uh, by the for the Irish people by the Clinton Foundation. So with that introduction, I'm going to let you and Charles take it out, and I'll come in from time to time when I think there's a point to be made or some focus
That,
to be developed in the conversation.
that'll be fantastic,
Great.
that Corsi. Charles, sorry, we got that background there. Can you just cover your mic when we're speaking? We can hear a lot of background noise there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've got it covered.
We got a cup of cocoa.
But so I'll try to go through this.
Go ahead, sir. Take it away.
All right. So in the United States, the charity sector is actually quite large. People in the United States give away $200 billion a year, roughly, each year to charities. And all told, recent statistics suggest that there's about $5.2 trillion in our charity sector. Now, the problem with that, everyone says, profit-making companies, on the left, profit-making companies are evil and not-for-profits are great. When you take a not-for-profit that doesn't have an independent board, that isn't audited, where you're not checking the numbers, that's connected to politically dynastic political families, Republicans, the Bushes, and the Clintons, the Obamas, both sides, who can then work their magic into the career people and the political hacks in the Department of Justice and our IRS. You have the potential to become Robin Hood in reverse, to steal from the poor and give to the rich via an unregulated, loosely controlled, money laundering operation. Now, it may seem a bit much to accuse the Clintons of that, but when you look at the evidence is staring you right in the face. In the United States of America, a public charity, which is what the Clinton Foundation is, has to make incredibly detailed disclosures, not only at federal level, but in every U.S. state, and I think it's 46 or so of the 50 U.S. states require special additional disclosures, in some cases that can be much more tough than the federal disclosures. So there's a wealth of information out there. The first thing to check on the Clinton Foundation is, what is it supposed to do? And, you can put out marketing materials the way the Clintons like to do. We all know Bill Clinton likes to talk, Hillary less so. But what you say in a marketing brochure is irrelevant. What matters is in a document over here called the Articles of Incorporation of a Charity. That document must specifically limit what a charity can do. And it is important to focus on what the purpose, as a term of art, what the purpose of a charity. The purpose of the Clinton Foundation all along has only been to house the presidential records that were created or received during the 8-year period when Bill Clinton was president of the United States, and also to study that period at a complex based in Little Rock, Arkansas. The Clinton Foundation has never adjusted its Articles of Incorporation to do anything other than that. Yet, beginning by 2001, around January 2001, when Bill Clinton left the White House actually in disgrace, he needed something else to do. It was tough to raise money for yet another library in a place like Little Rock. That's not a sexy cause.
Yeah.
So he got involved. He got involved with various, frankly, crooks. One of them was a gentleman called Rajat Gupta, who then was the managing partner of a gigantic consulting firm called McKinsey. And Rajat was in trouble himself. Later, he went to prison for insider trading. The two of them began, there was an earthquake in India, and everybody around the world were very generous when we see floods and earthquakes and tsunamis. Rajat and Bill got together and created an illegal charity called the American Indian Foundation. And that, in one set of disclosures, they claim that they raised $1 billion.
Wow.
But in their official books, they claim that they raised less than $100,000. And that is the essence of charity fraud. If you have a loosely controlled thing that's going after sexy causes like fighting earthquake relief or AIDS or Haiti, billions of dollars will come your way. If you've got, famous people around the charity, Bill Clinton and Elton John and Princess Diana, you name it, somebody like that will attract literally billions of dollars via the internet, via wires and other ways. And if you can convince other government leaders like your Taoiseach,
Taoiseach, yeah, very good. Well done, Charles.
Bertie Ahern, in 2003 was seduced into supporting this Clinton Foundation effort to fight HIV and AIDS. That was a completely illegal, unauthorized effort. No one has ever been able successfully to track down the amount of money that actually went to maybe towards that cause. In Ireland, I've been able to get, through your government, there's a Freedom of Information, the equivalent of a U.S. Freedom of Information Act request was made, and there's extensive emails and records that I got during 2003, back and forth between members of your government, arranging for the Irish people to give over 100 million euros to the Clinton Foundation to fight HIV/AIDS in Africa. Now, there's several problems with this. The agreements that were struck between the Clinton Foundation and your government are completely illegal.
Wow.
There was no such authorization in the United States for this activity. It was not a valid activity. It was a massive amount of money relative to what the Clintons were supposed to be doing. It was therefore, on the face of it, illegal under U.S. law. If it's illegal under U.S. law, I doubt it's legal under Irish law. Nonetheless, your people sent over $100 million, in theory, to fight HIV/AIDS in places like, I think it was Mozambique and Lesotho and one other country. I forget if it was Tanzania or not, or Rwanda. But beginning in 2003 or 2004, your government, under the direction of a gentleman, Connor Linehan, through Irish Aid, and there's all sorts of information available on this, did indeed send that money towards these projects, which in theory were directed by an illegally organized charity, led by Bill Clinton and led by our Magaziner. And there's never been a proper accounting of that money. Now, the money is one thing, but what Jerry will attest, what got my blood boiling on this is that the money was supposed to be used to purchase medicine to give to people who suffer from HIV and AIDS in Africa. And unfortunately, in Africa, even now, the rates of infection of HIV and AIDS are very, very high. And the medical treatment used to be very, very expensive. So the theory was that Bill Clinton and our Magaziner would bring down the price of this medicine, and it would be used to help these desperately poor people in Africa. There are majorly problems with this whole analysis, as often happens, anything having to do with our Magaziner and Bill Clinton. The first problem with it is in Ireland, and I looked at these statistics, in Ireland, you have a very high number of doctors per 100,000 people in your country. You have a very high number of hospital beds. You've got your country is basically fully electrified. You therefore can maintain medicines easily. People are more concentrated in cities, far more concentrated in cities than they are in Africa. In Africa, they're in Haiti and places like that. There are nations that have 2 doctors for every 100,000 persons. There are nations that only a third of the country is in these big cities that have no electricity in the rural areas. There's no way to get to these AIDS sufferers who are scattered all over the place. And it's not about simply giving them pills, even if they're properly constructed pills. People who have HIV and AIDS in these poor countries often have other diseases associated with, bad water, no electricity, and this and that. So you can't just simply send a stream of pills out into the hinterland using volunteers and think that you're fighting HIV/AIDS. That's if the medicine actually isn't adulterated. Now, there's a diabolical company called Ronboxi.
Charles, before you get into that, I want to go back over a few points, make sure everybody's clear on them. What you're saying, and I'm looking at some of the articles that are published citing your work, is that first of all, you verified that Ireland's charity regulatory authority, in emails sent to you, and this is going back now to 2015, October, the Irish Charities Regulatory Authority stated that the Clinton Health Access and the Clinton Global Initiative were not registered as a charity in Ireland. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what's the problem with that?
Well, technically speaking, how did they solicit money from your government without registering as a charity inside Ireland?
And more than that, they were also not registered as a charity in the United States to work in conjunction with the Irish government on HIV/AIDS. Is that correct?
That's also correct.
And these are not just are these technical violations? In other words, you can say, "Oh, I forgot to file the paperwork," but we're still a legitimate activity. Does that argument hold?
No, I'll give you an excellent case in point. In our country, there's a congresswoman, former congresswoman, named Corinne Brown. 5 days after James Comey let Hillary Clinton off the hook in 2016, in July, 5 days after that, our Department of Justice indicted, through the book, at Corinne Brown.
Wow.
She faced over 350 years in federal prison for operating a slush fund of only $800,000. And unlike Comey and unlike the Justice Department under Obama, they let the Clintons off the hook, but they descended on this black woman, 71-year-old woman, African-American woman, congressman, had been in Congress for 20 years, rushed her into court, threw the book at her, and she's currently serving 5 years in prison for an $800,000 slush fund. In Ireland alone, you're talking about over $100 million of money. No one knows where it went. My suspicion is that there are dirty Irish politicians who were involved skimming off some of this money. And, it could well be that the people who operate investigative services in Ireland don't want to investigate themselves. But, over $100 million just from the Irish people through their government went towards these illegal charities. And the Clintons had to know the charities were illegal, because what happened is, I have the correspondence in 2003 between the government and the Clinton Foundation that culminated in your government sending the Clintons €1 million at the end of 2003, when in no way, shape, or form did the Clinton Foundation have any authority to do any international work of any kind.
Okay, now, Charles, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. I want to document this more thoroughly in more detail, but finish, please, your point.
Sure. So the Irish government, somebody persuaded the Clinton Foundation that they needed to set up a separate subsidiary to engage in this work. And that subsidiary was created on March 24th, 2004 in Arkansas, called the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc. And in April, it filed an application, which we've never seen, to get federal tax exemption. There is no record available. We requested it. We've been denied it by the IRS and other ways. We'll probably get it now that there is an FBI investigation open into it. But there is no record that Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative ever received the required authority at federal level to operate a charity. And that's just the first step in the United States. You also have to get authority in Arkansas and every state where you solicit. There's no record that they ever got authorized validly for that. But there are records in the Irish government files that you can find, and I've given them to Jerry, of reviews of the long history and relationship of your government starting in 2004, sending hard-earned taxpayer money to a fraud.
Okay, now, Charles, I want to detail some of these now. So
sure.
The Development Corporation of Ireland, which is part of the Irish government's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, it's known as Irish Aid, said in its 2004 annual report, 2004, that Ireland has prioritized HIV/AIDS in its overseas development program. In 2003, the government of Ireland entered into a partnership with the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. This partnership forms a key component of our overall response, of Ireland's overall response to HIV/AIDS, which is embedded in advocating for a sustained and resourced response to HIV/AIDS, and that this should result in improving the coordination of resources and planning across government departments. Now, that led, and here the documentation you've given me here, and I'm looking at it right now, on July 9th, 2003, the government of Ireland announced it had signed an agreement with Clinton, Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, to donate $158.3 million to the W.J. Clinton Presidential Foundation for the purpose of purchasing HIV/AIDS drugs in Mozambique. Okay, the foundation at the time, however, had received an IRS favor determination letter only to build the Clinton Library in Little Rock, not to fight HIV/AIDS internationally, and was not registered as a charity in Ireland. Is that all correct?
That is all correct. And for the benefit of any American listeners to this, when I set up that fund to invest in Ireland and we produced an offering document, I learned the strict rules on disclosure in Ireland. Every sentence in an offering document, the strict Irish offering document, has to be backed up by evidence. And the problems in what you just described include the following. The charity was not registered in Ireland. The charity was not authorized for this purpose in the United States or in any U.S. state or any foreign location lawfully. Bill Clinton was not an officer, director, trustee of the Clinton Foundation, had no right to sign that document on behalf of the Clinton Foundation. He held no, official link to the Clinton Foundation until December of 2009. So that piece of paper is a worthless piece of paper as far as American law is concerned. And I know plenty of Irish-based lawyers. They're very smart. Obviously, somebody was told not to do due diligence, because if you spent half an hour figuring this out back in 2003, you could have seen that this was a fraud. And evidently, Ahern and his people decided, we're going to get behind this. This is helpful to our raising Ireland's profile internationally for doing good works. I mean, that was a very big commitment, I think, for Ireland to a foreign aid effort. And they just must have decided that they weren't going to do the work that you're supposed to do to check anything, because it's such an obvious fraud.
No due diligence whatsoever.
And Ahern, A-H-E-R-N. Ahern.
Bertie Ahern is I'll just say that he's a somewhat controversial gentleman who became Taoiseach, which is, I suppose, the equivalent of being prime minister.
Exactly.
And I think he resign in 2008.
You had a little bit of controversy following him around over his financial details and stuff like that, but I think he decided to step down. Yeah, right about that time.
Yeah, under this agreement that we're talking about, the agreement that was signed in 2003, Ahern committed Ireland to provide $71.9 million over 5 years, with the possibility of an additional allocation of $86.3 million to enable Mozambique to provide HIV/AIDS treatment to up to half a million people. Wow. Now, according to the Examiner, the agreement provided for a collaborative agreement between the Clinton Foundation and the Ireland government's Development Corporation Ireland, that made Ireland the first nation to publicly declare its support for increasing access to HIV/AIDS. Now, on September 26, 2006, Ahern signed a new agreement under a renewed partnership with the Clinton Foundation that would focus on addressing HIV/AIDS in two of the worst affected countries in the world, Mozambique and Lesotho. And the new agreement was to provide 60 million euro to Mozambique and 10 million euro to Lesotho over 5 years, making Ireland the largest donor to the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative in the world. Now, is that correct, Charles?
Well, it's correct that those agreements were signed, but it's not correct, or we don't really know where the Irish money actually landed. Because if you look in the Clinton Foundation disclosures and also of its spin-off Clinton Health Access Initiative, they disclose cumulative donations by various entities. And Ireland doesn't show up as much, and Development Corporation of Ireland doesn't, I don't even think, appear. So I think what happened in those memorandums of understanding is they were announced with great fanfare, and then other routes were taken of sending the Irish money that I guess was procured from your treasury. It was probably sent directly to these governments. Now, to talk about the government of Mozambique and the government of Lesotho, I mean, you are talking about two of the most corrupt places on earth. And there's multiple news stories out there of different charities that had trouble, especially in Mozambique, but also in Lesotho, where governments would, announce these memoranda of understanding, send money down to the country, thinking it's better to send it to the country itself. And you'd have, the leader of the country or the finance minister or the head of the central bank in various African countries and other countries just arrange to steal the money. And, it's a very dangerous thing to these medicines. Just as I was talking a little bit about these medicines, these HIV/AIDS medicines are very dangerous medicines. If you give HIV/AIDS medicine to somebody who does not have HIV, you're killing them. If you give them medicine that isn't properly, checked to make sure that, between flying it all or sending it by boat from India all the way down to Mozambique or Lesotho, that it's not stored properly, it's on the boat or in the plane, and then when it gets into the country at the port and then into the rural area, that medicine can degrade. And you give that medicine, the kind of medicine that the Clintons claim they were using for kids with AIDS or for people who can't, it's called second-line medicine, that it's where the first-line medicines don't work. You give that stuff and it's not right, if something's off with the medicine, you are actually killing people. I mean, and the deaths that people suffer from this are not, their skin falls off their body. It's horrifying ways to die. And, this kind of stuff cannot be administered by volunteers, by people, with 13 Blackberries flying around the world, jumping to this meeting and that meeting the way Ira Magaziner likes to do. You got to have people on the ground in these countries that don't have the hospital systems, that don't have the doctors and nurses, that don't have the way to get to the patients. The medicine cost of treating HIV and AIDS is less than a fifth in developed worlds of the additional costs, the care, the treatment, the doctor's attention, the buildings and all that kind of stuff. If you don't have any of that on the ground, you don't have roads, you don't have safe roads, you're kidding yourself putting that amount of money in these corrupt places at a time when, in addition to whatever Irish money was going to Mozambique, George W. Bush, and I have my issues with him, even though I'm distantly related to him, George W. Bush signed up to put $15 billion worth of U.S. money starting in 2003 into countries like Mozambique around the world to fight HIV and AIDS. $15 billion. Why would Ireland need to send another 150 whatever into these places? And how do they make sure, between the U.S. and other efforts and Irish efforts, that we weren't double counting? That we weren't sending, the corrupt people in rural parts of Mozambique weren't, taking the same droopy-eyed child and putting that person out in front of the audience and saying, yeah, please give us this money, Ireland. You get the money, take the same child, show that to the Americans. I mean, it's the potential for fraud here and abuse is so gigantic. And then you get to the question of the drugs themselves.
Before we get there, Charles, I want one more point I want to make sure you make and the audience appreciates, and that is, now, all this money that was supposed to be coming from Ireland, there's hundreds of millions of dollars to fight AIDS in Africa. When you look at the Clinton Foundation financials, does that money get reported in the Clinton Foundation financials in U.S. reporting?
It does not. And so there are, it's a great question, Jerry. Thanks for asking it. So the Clintons are masters on their website, which is, the Clinton Foundation. If you Google Clinton Foundation and financials, you'll get to it. They're masters in putting out some of the information that's relevant and then omitting crucial information, which we now have. So the versions of the annual tax forms, which anybody in the world can see for free, these are called 990s. The versions of these tax forms that are on the Clinton Foundation website are not, in many cases, the real versions. They're either early editions, they're later amended versions that are not on the site, or in the case of the Clinton Foundation HIV and AIDS effort, there actually were 990s for that subsidiary for 2004 and 2005. These are years when Ireland was pumping money for this purpose, supposedly, into fighting HIV and AIDS, in theory, through the Clinton Foundation, and no such amounts are disclosed. Indeed, for the entire period, 1998 through 2007, on the Clinton Foundation website and elsewhere, there's a line in their disclosures which says you're forced to tell the U.S. government, and if you fail to tell them properly, your tax returns can be opened up going all the way back to 98. Not one penny is declared of government donations from 1998 to 2007 in these official forms, which you're not allowed under U.S. law to submit a tax return that's partially correct. It's got to be entirely correct. And if the IRS makes an issue of it and decides to, finds these errors, in this case, there's no statute of limitations. You can go all the way back. So there's no evidence that in the Clinton's official tax forms that any money from Ireland of this vast sum, 150 million plus, or what, even if it's only 70 million in the first period, none of that shows up in the Clinton Foundation filing. So where did it go?
Okay, now, Charles, as we kind of transition into this issue of the, were the drugs provided legitimate, or any drugs that were actually going to cure anybody, and I want to go over your research on how the Clintons got the idea of the HIV/AIDS. Evidently, Bill Clinton attended a rally. It was, I guess, a conference, a World AIDS Conference in Barcelona, Spain, in 2002, July 2002, with Nelson Mandela. And at that conference, he was asked by the Prime Minister Denzel Douglas of St. Kitts and Nevis to help the Caribbean nations establish funds for the treatment of HIV/AIDS. Now, was that conference with Mandela in 2002 the origin of this idea that the Clinton Foundation established to create a library, presidential library in Little Rock, would suddenly take on the idea of HIV/AIDS? Is that where it got started?
It actually got started before then. And it got started before then in two ways. The first way it got started before then was a lady called Sanda Thurman, Thurman, who was Bill Clinton's one of his AIDS advisors when Bill was president. She concocted the idea of creating this crazy thing called the International AIDS Trust in January of 2001. And she convinced Mandela and Blair and Bill Clinton to be honorary chairman of this International AIDS Trust, which raised about $1 million, over 90% of which came from Bill Gates' charity in 2001, with the purpose, it was basically improperly organized, this thing. So they raised money. There is a 990 available for this International AIDS Trust. It confirms everything I just told you. There's no evidence that the International AIDS Trust ever got the tax-exempt authorization that it needs under U.S. law to function. So it was liquidated, the International AIDS Trust, in, I think, 2003. So the first attempt, you could say, to get this thing up and running was stillborn. Early in January 2002, according to a book by, you would know Joe Conason, Jerry, but I don't know him personally. Joe is a left-leaning close friend of Bill Clinton. He's written multiple articles and books about Bill Clinton, defending Bill Clinton, et cetera. He wrote a book which actually is pretty well written and entertaining called, the name will come to me, Man of the World. And it's all about, I think the subtitle is The Further Endeavors of Bill Clinton. And in that book, it came out in September, I think, or October 2016. It's a book that was written fully expecting Hillary Clinton to win. And so, unfortunately for Mr. Conason, Mr. Clinton, and many involved, it is a confession of charity fraud. There's extensive details concerning how this came to light, if you're to believe Joe Conason. In January of 2002, Ira Magaziner got a phone call from Maggie Williams, who supposedly asked Ira to help Bill Clinton think through how to make his foundation truly impactful. And out of that, Ira, at his own expense, started flying around the world, meeting with world leaders, and did a lot of work prior to the July 2002 confab, where you're right, Bill was there, Ira was there, many famous people were there, and Bill committed by July of 2002 to have his presidential foundation fight HIV/AIDS. But he was not an officer of the Clinton Foundation. He wasn't president. He wasn't of the Clinton Foundation. He had no official right to bind the Clinton Foundation to do anything, and certainly not to do things that were outside its authorized articles of incorporation. That is just bold-faced illegal activity. And, in Bill, you could say, well, maybe he didn't know better. Well, how can you say that? I mean, Bill was a gifted student at Georgetown. He then got a Rhodes Scholarship. He, got I don't think he ever finished that, and we don't know why that happened. But then he got into a great law school, Yale Law School, did well there, became attorney. He taught law in Arkansas, was attorney general. He was governor. He was president. How can you say this guy wouldn't understand basic corporate and nonprofit law? You cannot start telling some foundation what to do just because your name is on it. You know,
and Charles, also, if people contributed to this foundation, like the Gates Foundation or Ahern and the Irish Development Corporation, etc., do you bear any responsibilities as the contributing foundation for their shareholders and board if what you contribute to is a fraud?
Right. Those are so two separate questions. I think let's take the private foundations. That would be the Gates foundations. You know, these famous foundations you hear about in America. And I believe Dennis O'Brien has a foundation. I think it's called the Digicel Foundation. But the famous ones, the Gates Foundation is the largest private foundation in the world. Under U.S. law, in 1969 or thereabouts, Congress became concerned that these private foundations would be used as slush funds. So there's so many of them, the IRS can't check every one of them. So they changed the law to give place the onus on the directors or trustees of a private foundation to do due diligence on the entities they want to give money to. And there are very strict laws in the U.S. that if a private foundation gives money to a fraud, it has an absolute duty to attempt to get that money back in the year in which the donation is made. And if it fails repeatedly to do, you know, if it gives repeatedly monies to frauds and fails to get the money back, the IRS has the recourse to retroactively determine that an entity like the Gates Foundation, in fact, was a for-profit corporation and should never have gotten the tax benefits that it did get. And the penalties are gigantic. I mean, right now, I would argue that the Trump administration holds Bill Gates' future, and Warren Buffett is a big donor, in the square of their palms. They can direct the IRS to study the entire realm, and they should do this, of private foundations, to see who has been sloppy in due diligence, who has been routing money to this fraud, and then go against these private foundations that have, as I said, 5.2 trillion all told. Many of them are completely legitimate, but even if, let's say, half a trillion in assets are illegitimate, the United States taxpayer can get a bunch of money back, and probably they would go first. But in addition, the people of Ireland would have potentially recourse. I don't know Irish law, but would certainly have the ability to question the Gates Foundation and say, you know, we put money inside this fraud thinking that you had done due diligence, and you want to you keep all this Microsoft money here in Ireland tax-free. You know, maybe we want to revisit that, whether there shouldn't be special rules here about your mischievous behavior and your illegal behavior here. And so, yeah, Jerry, there's a tremendous exposure for the private foundations. Now, for the governments, I think what you're talking about, the recourse here is at the ballot box. I mean, how in this country, you know, when I went after GE, that was actually, if you think about it, it's more a left-leaning thing to do than a right-leaning thing to do. But I'm just against fraud. When I went after the Clinton Foundation, I found myself spending a lot more time on progressive radio with this great lady, Utrice Lead, and even on WBAI, which I would guess, Jerry, you've not been on WBAI.
No, I have not. No, I don't think so.
But one of the things that is really true, if you take a little kid and you explain to a little kid what damage can happen, that people can pretend that charity is actually doing good, when instead it's distributing medicine that's killing little children in Africa. You know, a 6-year-old kid will say, you know, that's wrong. We should punish these people. And so one of the things that is unifying, I think, this fight against the corrupt cronyism and establishment in both parties is the notion that charities must be operated lawfully. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You know, you cannot serve inside a charity and fail to discharge your primary duties of loyalty, care, and obedience to the law to this charity to make sure that it only does what it's supposed to do, and that is operate a research center and a presidential archive in Little Rock. That's all it was supposed to do. It wasn't supposed to have offices anywhere other than Little Rock, Arkansas. And yet
Now,
this thing just went crazy all over the world,
including Ireland.
especially including Ireland.
Now, as we get into the defective drugs that were produced out of India, this company Ranbaxy, why don't you explain who Ira Magaziner is and what kind of a role he played on the Clinton Health AIDS Initiative?
All right, so Ira Magaziner is a fellow who met Bill Clinton. He was a year behind him when Ira was a Rhodes Scholar, who also strangely did not fill out his 2-year term as a Rhodes Scholar in Oxford. But the two of them met there. They stayed friendly. Ira became a strategic consultant. Ira, did very well for himself. He's quite very proficient with technology. And Ira was among the people who takes credit for crafting Ireland's forward-looking game plan of attracting the pharmaceutical industry, attracting knowledge-based industries into Ireland, which is a campaign that began, I think, in the 70s and 80s and really took off in the 90s and the early 2000s. Ira really can rightly take credit for that. But the problem with Ira Magaziner is he is sloppy as hell. You can see this in the public filings. His name is all over fraudulent declarations made in the United States of America and around the world. His signature is on these documents. And he's a smart person, so he can't, he can't have done this by chance. He has knowingly been engaged in perpetrating one of the largest frauds ever attempted in history, operating this Clinton Foundation for purposes it's not authorized for, sucking up hundreds of millions and billions of dollars from governments around the world to go into the slush fund that was never the one that the Jerry's talking about now was operated out of Boston, actually. First Quincy, Massachusetts, but then Boston. He has never done any of this paperwork properly. And how do you explain that? How do you say, here's a Rhodes Scholar, one of the smartest people in America, goes off, has this distinguished career, earns tens of millions of dollars advising on complex assignments around the world, and he can't see that it's incredibly dangerous to, procure drugs from sketchy places, sketchy companies, and then fly this stuff around the world. But there's no evidence that the Clinton Foundation ever spent anywhere near the amount of money that is claimed that Ireland sent them for drugs themselves. No evidence of that.
And they got involved with this company in India called Ranbaxy, Ranbaxy, Ranbaxy. What was that company all about?
All right, so that's an interesting thing. So in the United States, our drug prices are very high. So there has been a business developed, and I think it operates around the world, selling what are called generic medicines, generic knockoff copies of branded drugs. That's in essence what this Ranbaxy was. And by the time they met the Clintons in 2002, Ranbaxy was being advised by Rajat Gupta, that former, he's a felon now. Then he was the chairman of this famous accounting consulting firm called McKinsey. Rajat had the assignment, his firm had the assignment for building Ranbaxy up. Rajat connected Bill Clinton to Ranbaxy. Rajat also hired Bill Clinton's daughter, Chelsea, to work for McKinsey and on these health-related topics. And there's a great work done by Marsha Blackburn's staff. She's a congressperson in Tennessee now running for Senate. They did a lot of work in 2016, published a report in September 2016 that lays this all out, called the India Success Story. You can see it online. And this Ranbaxy company, now in hindsight, we know, had a major league problem. They had this gigantic business exporting generic drugs, not HIV drugs, but generic drugs into the U.S. They needed political cover. So they first hooked up with the Clinton Foundation in October of 2003. There's an agreement mentioned in their annual report. Ranbaxy was a publicly traded company. And Bill and his team and Ira started pumping out and promoting the use of these Ranbaxy products. There's a great article. It's a very sobering article called Dirty Medicine in Fortune magazine, published in May of 2013, that recounts all of this in gory depth. And I'll be quick on it, Jerry and Graham, but by August of 2004, the World Health Organization and the government of South Africa became very concerned about the quality of Ranbaxy HIV/AIDS medicines that were being promoted by Bill Clinton and Ira Magaziner. So an investigation ensued, and it turned out it took a long time, and the prosecution of Ranbaxy in this country was in part led by Rod Rosenstein. By May of 2013, Ranbaxy paid a $500 million fine for distributing adulterated HIV/AIDS and other medicines around the world, in part through the Clinton Foundation. And I would argue that that fine is not enough. The promoters of Ranbaxy played it smart. They, the second these investigations started, they sold their stakes for many billions of dollars. Those promoters are currently being sued by the company that they sold Ranbaxy to in the middle of this investigation, and who knows what will happen to them in the end. When this Fortune magazine is really chilling, and if there are children in the room, they should maybe leave. I'll use that language, but this is the tough story I'm going to tell.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles. You're okay. Should be good. I have that article up in front here for the people to see.
Good. So what happened is when this whistleblower determined to go public, to push the company to do the right thing in 2004 and 2005, originally the top brass at Ranbaxy said, all right, we want to make this right. And they take it up to the CEO, thinking they're going to get a green light to fix everything and do the right thing and do right by the people who are using these drugs. And the CEO, an Indian gentleman, looks at the group supposedly and says, what are you guys making a big fuss about this for? All we're doing is killing black people in Africa.
Wow.
Who cares?
Wow. Unbelievable.
That's the article. It's in that article.
And this, of course, also then involves the money that came from Ireland, because the money that was pumped into this, Ireland and France were two countries that were pumping a lot of the money into this, and the World Health Organization in Geneva was also involved in this scam. And Ranbaxy, what it fundamentally came to it, as you're pointing out, didn't care that the drugs were defective, because they're saying it's only blacks in Africa dying. Is that all correct, Charles?
It is. And when you think through, in my younger days as a student, I actually traveled extensively and wrote a lengthy paper about the country of Kenya. But I traveled all over Africa. And, when you do that, when you spend time in Africa and you take off your politically correct glasses if you're still wearing them, you come to understand that in Africa, it's not a case of racism. There still is, profound ethnic rivalry, black on black ethnic rivalry. There's no such thing as, black solidarity in many places in Africa. And imagine this, you're sitting there, you're a corrupt leader of, let's just pick a country like Rwanda, where we know there were trouble, and we know there's deep ethnic rivalry there. And you hear that some amiable dunce, George W. Bush, is going to send around $15 billion to different countries to say they have an HIV/AIDS problem. You're going to put your hand up and say, yeah, I got an HIV/AIDS problem. I need some of that money. And then if you're really diabolical and you want to kill off members of an ethnic group that, has been opposed to you historically, you have no problem distributing adulterated drugs to that group because it kills your enemy. So it's a perfect thing. You get a lot of money coming into your country. You can divert that money personally. You can pretend you're doing good work fighting HIV/AIDS. You get international credit for that. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, you're killing off your rivals. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I suspect did happen and is happening in Africa and around the world, because this Clinton charity is not properly, it's never been meant to do this. It's never had the required controls.
All right, well, Charles, let's shift grounds and talk about Haiti, because I think Haiti is another major part of the Irish scam. And
absolutely, Dr. Corsi.
What happened in Haiti, Charles, that precipitated the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation involvement?
Sorry about that. I got a call and it just overrides Skype. Sorry about that.
No, Charles, we're saying we're shifting now to Haiti.
Okay.
And what happened in Haiti? Talk about the earthquake and how it got the Clinton Foundation and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton involved, because we're going to lead now to the major role played in the Haiti saga by Dennis O'Brien.
Okay. Well, let me, if I may, Jerry, let me set the stage by going a little bit further back into time.
Yes.
And Haiti is a country that arguably God forgot. God has decided to torture. I mean, Haiti sits on one side. I think the the western side of an island. Dominican Republic is on the eastern side. Dominican Republic has managed to make a go of it, and Haiti has just never had a chance, it would seem. A gentleman that some people describe as, the next Albert Schweitzer, Dr. Paul Farmer, decided to start experimenting in Haiti before he actually was a doctor, and in theory began curing people, but began experimenting, with HIV/AIDS treatments. And I've got experts looking at his work who really question the soundness of his work. But based on his work, starting in 2001, April of 2001, the arguments to throw tons of money at fighting HIV/AIDS were advanced in part using the work of Dr. Paul Farmer and another person I think is a scoundrel, Jeffrey Sachs, who was then a professor at Harvard. They mounted this argument that the world needed to come up with tens of billions of dollars to help fight HIV/AIDS using these drugs. And they then began with the Clinton Foundation experimenting on the people of Haiti starting in around 2004. So there's a long track record, I think, of abuse, and the likelihood is that these Ranbaxy drugs went into Haiti starting around 2004 or thereabouts. By 2010, in January, actually, I need to go back a step. In April of 2009, Bill somehow was convinced to be a special UN envoy to Haiti, which gave him superpowers, above the law, basically, in Haiti, to start trying to help. And then after that happened, in January of 2010, I think January 12th or thereabouts, an earthquake hit, and it just devastated the country. Devastated it. It hit right in the capital city there, and you see pictures now. It's no better. It's worse off now than it was then. It's just a complete mess. And there's a country where, again, you have the problem of you don't have doctors, you don't have nurses, you don't have hospital beds, you don't have electricity where you need it. You don't have basic infrastructure that would allow the fight against HIV/AIDS and other issues to happen for you. You just don't have any of that. So there are various estimates of how much money was raised. People's, it was really poor people would give on their cell phone, maybe using Dennis O'Brien's technology, the Digicel technology, would send, in little bits and bobs, €5 here, €10 there, and then big governments. I don't know how much Irish government gave, but the U.S. government, the U.K. government, many governments gave, all told, some estimate as much as $13 billion may have been sent towards Haiti. Now, to put that amount of money in perspective, the entire population of Haiti in a recent year that I checked only consumes $10 billion in total, the whole country. So if you send $13 billion towards a country where each year all the population spends $10 billion, you ought to get more than a T-shirt for that. I mean, you should be able to put, hospitals up and redo roads and maybe, the electrical systems and this and that. No evidence. There's been no accounting for where this money went. And worse, in the Clinton Foundation books, it's a travesty. Bill talks in his forums that the Clinton Foundation first set up a Clinton Foundation Haiti fund. There's no evidence of that. Then with the Bushes, they created the Clinton Bush Haiti Fund, and they claim in a filing for 2010 that they routed $37.2 million, which is a gigantic amount of money in the Clinton Foundation books, down to Haiti. But they say they sent it to a post office box address in Baltimore, Maryland, where there is no such Clinton Bush Haiti Fund. It's never registered in Maryland. There is no such entity. So on the surface of it, that screams out as a massive fraud in the Clinton Foundation books, $37.2 million. Bill and the former leader of Haiti were then appointed co-chairman of something called the Interim Haiti Relief Commission that was supposed to administer the $13 billion or whatever the money was, and they refused to account for that money. And they're able to get away with it because the UN is a sieve of corruption, in my view. I mean, that is just a travesty that the people of Haiti, these downtrodden people of Haiti, may have had as much as $13 billion sent towards it, and then thieves have basically stolen money that was intended to help these poor people. And still those poor people are there without electricity, without food, without medicine, without education, without infrastructure. This is after we, in theory, have sent them $13 billion. That's disgusting.
Now,
Absolutely.
And Digicel now, O'Brien, Irish billionaire Dennis O'Brien, owns Digicel, and it's incorporated in Bermuda, and it provided the phone service, mobile phone service in Haiti. Now, O'Brien claims he opened all these schools in Haiti, which would sound like he was doing some very good, philanthropic work. But what, in fact, did Digicel? What was the operation of Digicel in Haiti, and how did it work in conjunction with the Clinton Foundation?
All right, so in theory, and there's no proof of this because none of the Clinton Foundation books have ever been actually audited by using the strict rules that apply. So we don't really know the truth yet, but Dennis O'Brien is listed and a Digicel Foundation are listed as major contributors over time to the Clinton Foundation. So as yet, we don't have any proof of whether that money actually went there. I don't know where the Digicel Foundation is organized, but as a guess, its books are probably not checkable either. What is checkable is that Digicel actually filed a public offering to try to go public a while ago. I don't think they were successful. And the last time I checked that offering, which is a matter of public record, anybody can get it. If you just punch in Digicel, the name, into Google, an offering, you'll see a copy of it. That document describes a company that appears to me to be nearing bankruptcy. It has massive debts. Its financial statements are horrific. And it's difficult to understand why it's in poor shape, because another source is on the U.S. records. You can get records of how much money the International Finance Corporation or something like it has advanced to Digicel to build out its networks. Typically, they operate in these very poor countries like Haiti, the Caribbean, the South Pacific, countries, Papua New Guinea, I think, might be another one, but countries where they're far-flung countries that don't have the infrastructure, and where instead of building out a wired network, you build a wireless network. And why would you pick a place like Haiti for that? Because you can use these Digicel phones to wire money and send money over your phone, and you can collect fees for doing all that. So, this, to me, the whole Digicel financial statements, the relationships with the Clinton Foundation, let's assume for a second that Digicel is entirely legitimate and the Digicel Foundation is entirely legitimate. Well, both of those entities have problems if they were indeed routing money to any Clinton Foundation entity, because not a single Clinton Foundation entity is a legitimate charity. And if you're the Digicel Foundation claiming you gave to the Clinton Foundation, but it's a fraud, you got a problem at the Digicel Foundation. In Bermuda, I don't know how the tax laws work and the regulation would work of an entity engaged in fraudulent activity around the world. But, I would guess there could be issues in Bermuda.
Well, Charles, here's some of the background here is that Digicel won the what they call the Toko Toko mobile system, which means pocket money in Creole. And the USAID Food for Peace program, which was under the direction of State Department Cheryl Mills, who was the attorney and chief, one of the top advisors for Hillary Clinton, chose the Toko Toko system to make money transfers from this USAID Food for Peace program. When Haitians used the system, they paid O'Brien's company millions in fees. They also became users of O'Brien's Toko Toko system. So by 2012, Digicel had 77% of the Haitian mobile phone market, a rise fueled in part by the fact that it was a digital bank supplier. From April 2011 to March 2012, and this is Peter Schweitzer's research documented as well, Digicel's revenues increased by 14% and its subscriber base by 27%. By September 2012, Haiti overtook Jamaica as Digicel's most profitable market, and O'Brien granted himself a $300 million dividend from the company. So it sounds like that was a very profitable relationship with USAID, worked out through Cheryl Mills and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, with Bill Clinton in the background, serving on this Haitian committee, deciding how all international money coming to Haiti including U.S. aid money, would be spent.
Well, what you described there is massive fraud. It's called the technical crime is inurement and corruption. I mean, this is, we have it in the U.S. currently. I don't know how much your visitors, your listeners are aware of this. We have criminal cases going on against Paul Manafort, who was briefly the campaign manager for Donald Trump, in which Manafort is accused of maybe collecting, say, $20 million. Under U.S. charity law, you are not, if you're a significant donor, you cannot, which the Digicel people were, you must disclose any what is called private gain. And private gain is not simply financial gain. It's any edge or advantage, competitive break that you get by associating yourself with a charity. All of that has to be disclosed. And if the cumulative private gains are more than $1,000 for the charity over its life, normally the IRS will look at this and say, that wasn't a charity, it was a business development exercise. You said you were doing good stuff in Haiti to get your $300 million dividend and to increase your position inside Haiti and other countries. This charity has been operated as a business development arm of Digicel. We're going to tax the charity, we're going to disallow the donations, we're going to demand the tax benefits back with penalties and interest, and you got to refile all your paperwork. But absolutely not. If it is the case, as Schweitzer alleges, and Peter is a very smart man with a great team behind him, if it is true that by associating himself with Haiti, that Dennis O'Brien managed to build the franchise value of his Digicel operation so dramatically as to give himself several years after $300 million, and not only does he have a problem, and not only does the Clinton Foundation have a problem, but Hillary Clinton and Cheryl Mills and anybody associated with that decision have massive problems, because that is egregious corruption.
And Charles, the story Peter Schweitzer tells goes on because in U.S. aid in June 2010 announced that this is again 6 months after the earthquake, decided it was going to jumpstart the delivery of financial services by mobile phone in Haiti with a $10 million grant aimed at the creation of the Haiti Mobile Money Initiative. Only 10% of the people in Haiti have bank accounts. This is the problem. The idea was that this Haiti Money Initiative was formed as a partnership between the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the U.S. government through U.S. AIDS. And the idea was that this Haiti Mobile Money Initiative would offer prize money through the fund to encourage money service providers to develop rapidly a mobile money transfer system operating throughout Haiti. Now, this program was going to be implemented. They had on January 11, 2011, USAID and the Gates Foundation announced a $2.5 million award to O'Brien's Digicel from the Haiti Mobile Money Initiative funded by Bill Gates and the USAID to launch a mobile money service in Haiti, and through this Toko mobile service. Now, when they fully developed this, only 60,000 people in Haiti actually used mobile phone applications to transfer money to friends and relatives internationally or within Hawaii or Haiti, or to pay bills or transact business in a country of 10 million. Yet the cash that went through this was ultimately paid $2.5 million award to Digicel to provide the service.
It's outrageous.
How
it's outrageous.
so?
And because you have to disclose these type of transactions in the tax filings. These are called related party transactions. So where a significant donor, i.e. the Digicel Foundation and Dennis O'Brien, derives a financial benefit, really any benefit, through the operation of a charity, that must be disclosed in a timely fashion in full on the charity's filings so that the IRS can determine, is this really a charity or is it a business development scheme, which certainly appears to be. And so, things like this are outrageous. They're measured for materiality against the size of the Clinton-Bush Haiti operation, which was very small, actually. So when you look at those Clinton-Bush Haiti filings, which of course are not on the Clinton Foundation website, but you can get them. It's a left-leaning group, which doesn't bother me either way, but it's called ProPublica, the nonprofit explorer. You can get information on any American charity through that, and you will find information on the Clinton-Bush Haiti charity through that, or alternatively in the New York State filings, you can get them. And that award of $2.5 million should have been disclosed.
Well, and also then in February 2015, Bill Clinton joined Dennis O'Brien, and they opened this 175-room Marriott hotel in the Turgot area of Port-au-Prince, which is an area that was, more of a tourist area. Now, the Marriott Corporation had the Marriott Corporation press release said on the hotel's opening noted that a development company owned and established by Digicel managed the design and oversaw the building of the hotel, with Digicel owning the hotel after investing $45 million in the project. And this is, again, Bill Clinton and O'Brien, who was touted then as the head of the Clinton Global Initiative Haiti Action Network, a new entity they formed, which I doubt was that ever registered anywhere, Charles?
No.
Attended the hotel's opening ceremony with Haiti President Michael Martelly and Marriott's International President for the Caribbean and Latin American region, Craig R. Smith. And they said this idea of opening the Marriott Hotel came from Bill Clinton and was organized. They'd arranged behind the scenes. What was little noticed in the opening ceremony press releases was that the funding from the World Bank, the Clintons arranged behind the scenes to help subsidize O'Brien and Digicel and the construction of the project, amounted to something like $26.5 million in financing that the World Bank had arranged to provide to Digicel, and it was developed. The loan was syndicated with the Netherlands Development Finance Company, a private sector development company bank in The Hague, known as the Dutch Development Bank, operated under the supervision of the Dutch Central Bank. So how would you interpret all of that, Charles?
Well, I think the World Bank should fundamentally be disbanded. It's never been properly supervised, and in this time frame, I believe the chairman was a man called Jim Kim. Are you there?
Yep.
Yes, I'm right
Still
here.
Sir.
Yeah. Jim Kim, who founded Partners in Health with Dr. Paul Farmer, and worked in the illegal Clinton HIV/AIDS operation in 2004 as a top medical advisor, and he then became head of the World Bank, doling out all these, many, in this case, 20-odd million or whatever it was, but around the world, billions of dollars. The World Bank has the ability to give to these suspect projects. So the notion that Haiti really needed, to do an upscale hotel as a way to lift itself out of the dire straits they were in, rather than building hospitals and roads and power plants and stuff like this, is laughable. It's absurd.
And this also would fall into your category of enormement, where there was personal gain coming from, developing this hotel, exploiting the earthquake and the misery of the Haitians as a project to develop Haiti, when in fact, what did the hotel accomplish?
Right, and to put that in perspective, the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund, the entire exercise of money raised through 2010, 11, and 12, I think if you add it all up, is less than $100 million. Slightly less than $100 million. So to have one hotel, that project that may have enriched Dennis O'Brien enormously, you have to measure that gain against the size of the Clinton-Bush-Haiti fund. And of course it's material, and of course none of these relationships are disclosed in the Clinton-Bush-Haiti fund public filings, which is a special problem because in 2010, who do you want to guess was an important donor to the Clinton-Bush-Haiti fund?
Who do you have in mind, Mr. O'Brien?
President Barack Obama.
President Obama.
Out of a portion of his Nobel Peace Prize winnings that were sent to him, the trustees of the Peace Prize Fund wired a couple hundred thousand, I think it was, towards the Clinton-Bush-Haiti fund before it was lawfully organized. That in of itself is another problem, but a small problem. But no, this is, when I first got in touch with Jerry long back on this, the reason I was interested in this is it's an example. You can use the diabolical track record of the Clinton Foundation, pointing out all of its flaws, to help people understand how not to run a charity. It's a perfect bad example. Pick any law that matters, and this foundation has likely broken it.
Wow.
And the people of Haiti, through this period of time with the Clintons involved and O'Brien, did their economic condition improve after the earthquake, or what's the population of Haiti like today, given all this money that was supposed to go to charity in Haiti? Are the people better off?
They're not better off, and there is a diaspora of people, of Haitians living outside Haiti, many of them in America, who regularly, protest in front of wherever the Clintons go. They protest. They hold street demonstrations, and they should, because what these people do, they're like, I don't know what the right animal that would come out, when there's what do you call a buzzard? Somebody dies on the street, and the buzzards come out, and they steal all of the medicine and the money that's supposed to go to the people who are truly afflicted, and then they go to all these gala parties around the world and give themselves awards for being corporate good citizens. I mean, it's really disgusting behavior, and it's even more disgusting that people are asleep and falling for this baloney. I mean, you can see all that I'm saying, all that Jerry and I are talking about is in the public record. You can find much of what I've said is on my website, but you can see for yourselves what we're talking about here.
And what is your website? What is your website, Charles?
It's CharlesOrtel.com, Charles. I'm bringing up some of the articles as you're relating them to them, guys. I know I'm staying quiet, but I'm bringing up the appropriate sourced facts as you speak.
Yeah.
And Charles, the people of Ireland listening and understanding how the HIV/AIDS scandal in Africa, the defective drugs by Rambaxi, the Haiti situation, and Dennis O'Brien's involvement with Digicel, and the money made out of Digicel and all these phone money transfer systems. What should the people of Ireland do? I mean, what would you advise the Irish people to do, knowing and being able to document that what we're saying today is true?
Well, our country began as a colony. America did. Obviously, I was not around then, nor was Jerry. But, it took Thomas Jefferson and some brave people who were in the main rich. And at the time they rose up, and I'm not advocating a violent revolution here, but I think it is past time, for the people of Ireland to see these truths for themselves. Look with your own eyes. Nobody in Ireland is in favor of sending tens of millions of your hard-earned taxpayer money towards a crooked bunch of thugs in our former president, Bill Clinton, and his allies, while you continue to lose your jobs and suffer under a system that doesn't seem to be working well, run by these very same people. I understand that in Ireland, the voter turnout levels are very, very low. So the status quo, as we found with Donald Trump's election, the status quo can be changed if the silent majority, and I used to be a member of the silent majority. I said nothing publicly about politics until August of 2007, when I began to talk about the problems with General Electric. So for a long period of time, I didn't participate. It's time for the people of Ireland to listen to these experts, to see the rubbish that's coming out of their mouths for what it is, rubbish, stinky rubbish, and get to the bottom of what has been going on here. Get your money back. You have an ability to get this money back from Bill Gates, from other foundations. There are paths that you can do. You need to stand up and speak up and get out and remove these crooked politicians from office, as Donald Trump has took a first step in the presidential election. You see in America how long it takes. Our country's very big, and we spend $6 trillion a year on government, which is an absurd amount. You see how long it's taking him to get the rot out of the American government. It's going to take time. You got to win elections. You got to put people in, honest people who maybe haven't been involved in the political process before. You got to get them together the way you're doing this now. Get out to the polls. Hold your politicians accountable. Get into power. And once you're in power, you launch the kind of investigations that you're going to see happen in the United States that will expose all this. And you're going to see it in many other countries. It's time to rip the rot out of government and let the people stand in control of governments in Ireland and other places around the world. Another thing I would say, I was on Bloomberg Television, I think in 2011, with on an Asian program, talking about the mayhem in Europe, and I was, I think, the first person to suggest that Germany should leave the EU, because I think the EU is a failed experiment. I actually think Ireland would be better off outside the EU. And
yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, I think that about covers it. I mean, Grand Torino, do you think we've covered the issues pretty thoroughly?
Oh, I think you touched on some of the more important ones. Thank you very much for that. I think you did we've done a great job there.
It's Charles's research, and I want to kind of conclude today by saying that where we began, that what the strength of Charles's research, what has always impressed me,
yes,
is the ability to go through the financial statements and the public registrations that need to be filed for a charity to be run. Charles is very good on this, either with the corporation and their requirements for reporting and filing audited financials, and equally with the charity. And this, I think, is the largest, most egregious, outrageous charity fraud in history, perpetrated by a former president with countries including Ireland. And I think the purpose of Charles's work, and certainly mine, other people like Peter Schweitzer, are to bring this to a close. We mentioned Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch. There are many of us around the world that want to see these fraudulent charities closed and the people who run them brought to justice, because I think it's unconscionable that you take a earthquake in Haiti or a massive disease epidemic like HIV/AIDS in Africa, and that you raise money supposedly with the good intentions of helping these people, and what you do is the money gets stolen by criminals and crooks, doesn't get reported, and the people end up as bad off or worse than they were before. Now, Charles, would you like to kind of summarize your conclusions on all of this?
Sure. So when I started on this, really with you, Jerry, I knew it was going to be a multi-year process. And, fortunately, I have the patience to last it out. And I'm delighted to continue working on this. But a lot of people who've been following this will say, all right, Charles, when is something going to actually happen? And I can report, it's a matter of public record, that in the United States, there are multiple active investigations at federal and state level that have been going on for some time. And once you go down, I'm just a person, yes, I can read financial statements, but when you sick the FBI and motivate them and other of our tough services to actually look at this, including the IRS and then state taxing authorities, you have enormous weapons inside this country that have been trained on this foundation mess for a long time. And in addition, we've had success now with foreign governments. The largest donor to the Clinton Foundation, believe it or not, is the government of France, through an entity called UNITAID. And UNITAID is another slush fund based in Geneva that has sent over $600 million to the Clinton Foundation. And much of that money disappeared in 2007, 2008, and 2009 when Hillary Clinton was running and losing her chance to be president, and then as Barack Obama took over as president. So there is a big scandal at United. It involves not simply France, which is the biggest donor, but the UK, Norway, Spain, and many other smaller countries, South Korea, small African countries have given money to United, which in turn was then diverted, stolen, or worse, as it was sent towards the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative that actually never existed as a valid charity at any time, anywhere in the world. So these investigations take time. They're going to embarrass a lot of people. But I think, as was the case in GE, when I started on that, my initial friends I would go to would say, I think GE has a very serious problem. And then my friends would look at me and say, well, I think you're crazy. And it took a little while, but before long, public sentiment shifted on GE. I don't think there's a single defender outside the company who would look at this mess that still isn't finally resolved and say, yeah, that's a great place. Similarly, the Clinton Foundation, the tide of public opinion has shifted against it. With each passing day now, you're going to find, and I'm going to find, more and more information come out into the public domain that will confirm this work. I don't have access to any inside information at the Clinton Foundation, only stuff that is in the public domain. But as people start getting indicted, as testimony comes forward, and as convictions are won, it will become ever clearer that all of these fake foundations associated with the Clintons are just that. It's a fraud. It's the
And Charles,
biggest,
I'm sorry.
it's the largest unprosecuted set of frauds in the history of mankind. And I'm not, promoting something. I'm just, those are the facts. It's way bigger than Madoff.
And Charles, the Clintons have also, we've seen now that we have some of the records from the FBI with the Inspector General coming forward and seen, for instance, this Andrew McCabe, who was just fired yesterday, so he would not get his pension, had actually been involved in protecting the Clintons, in this case, taking the private email server that Hillary used and rewriting and helping to rewrite FBI Director James Comey's public statement about not prosecuting them, to change the language so that no language suggesting violation of a criminal law was included in Comey's statement. So with this level of political cover within the Department of Justice and other high levels of the U.S. government, the Clintons have managed to skate through crisis after crisis and managed to date to keep the Clinton Foundation from being seriously investigated. What makes you think that now there would be political resolve in the United States or around the world to actually conduct a serious criminal investigation that would bring people, which may include not only Bill and Hillary Clinton, but others in other foreign countries, or even the Gates Foundation, the Gates Foundation's trustees, to justice by being indicted for serious criminal offenses? What makes you think the political resolve today would be willing to pursue this?
Well, I think the election of 2016 and, the degree to which Donald Trump has rolled up his sleeves and gotten to work many different fronts, winning, putting America back on a path towards robust growth again, getting his people finally confirmed and in office. The fact that we do know, it's been publicly confirmed, that the FBI has been investigating this since recently, and in addition, the IRS has confirmed they investigated starting in July of 2016. So I think what Donald Trump had to do first, in your book, Killing the Deep State, is an important read. That there's a lot of rot in government that has been there going back to 1992, if not earlier, maybe even 89, when George H.W. Bush was there, or even perhaps before then. We've set up an apparatus, that's extra constitutional, that's working through the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, and other ways, to above, any kind of oversight. And it's going to take some time to rip that out and hold people accountable. But Donald Trump has begun doing that. The firing of McCabe is very important, and I think you're going to see now that that Donald Trump is there to stay and has staying power. You're going to see people inside our country and around the world conclude, actually, in a bipartisan way, that operating a presidential charity as a personal slush fund, this sloppily, where people may have actually been killed by the activity in HIV/AIDS, is not something that it's not a traffic ticket violation.
Huge.
If Corinne Brown's going to go to jail for $800,000, then this thing has declared revenue of over $2 billion that we know about. Counting affiliates like the Global Fund and others, you're up above $100 billion easily before you start thinking about illegal personal gains. You can't put an African American congresswoman in prison who served this country for 20 years. You can't put her in prison for 5 years over $800,000 and let the Clintons skate. You can't do it. I'm not going to let that happen. You've got
Charles,
to bring this to the fore.
do you think? I mean, this again. We talk about the deep state, and so here you've got a former president operating since 2001. So now we've got 17 years of criminal activity that you're alleging and documenting here as a deep state activity that whenever it comes to the Justice Department attention, whenever it's brought to a state attorney general, has for 17 years been ignored and covered up. So the Clintons have been able to operate, essentially outside the law, outside the law criminal activity that has been fully known by anyone who dared to take a look, and never brought to justice over it, but setting a model for where now we can have the Obama Foundation, which appears headed down the same track, with a library that's questionable yet as to whether anything is going to be contributed to the library from the presidential records, or what this foundation is going to declare as its next purpose to go off and raise money. And by the way, we didn't get into other Irish connections. We could easily have talked about Bono,
we might do another
and
show,
U2.
Dr. Corsi. We might squeeze another one or
Bono,
two in.
And U2, and how they've gone on the bandwagon and promoted this as if this were this deep state ability to operate outside the laws, to violate the laws with impunity. Wink, 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 everybody knowing it. I mean, how do you assess our ability to attack something this huge, this hidden, and this covered up by the mainstream media?
Well, there are some brave people in the FBI, maybe some in the executive branch, but the overwhelming majority of our Federal Bureau of Investigation are honest, hardworking people who really, risk their lives to protect Americans and freedom-loving people around the world. There is something called the FBI Vault, which is a publicly available resource, and on the FBI Vault, they put out the evidence that they want the public to see of investigations that either happened or didn't happen, or whatever. So there is, if you punch in to Google William J. Clinton Foundation and FBI Vault, you will get two separate dumps of over 600 pages that show that for 4 years, from 2001 to 2005, when George W. Bush was president, and in theory, had his fingers on the running of the executive branch, the Clinton Foundation was indeed investigated by none other than James Comey, as in the Justice Department, and Robert Mueller in the FBI, and they could not see an obvious, gigantic fraud, culminated in 2004 with $64 million being stolen from the Clinton Foundation as they built this fake charity in Little Rock. They couldn't see the obvious. They let this thing skate. These very people, in case of Robert Mueller, who are now investigating Donald Trump. That evidence is there in the public domain. If you punch into that same search, Hillary R. Clinton in FBI Vault, you'll get to a 19-part dump that takes you through. It's thousands of pages. I've been through it. I've done shows on it with Crowdsource the Truth and Sunday with Charles, where we point you to all this evidence. But in brief, that FBI official document that by July 10th, 2015, Hillary Clinton was indeed under investigation for mishandling classified information, in an investigation that went nowhere because it frustrated senior State Department officials so much that by January 26th or 27th, that person who had sent incriminating evidence into the FBI was not heard back from James Comey, walks in unannounced and said, listen, what's going on here? I've got all this incriminating evidence. And 2 days later, Andrew McCabe was put in charge.
as deputy director of the FBI 2 days later. So there was a cover-up going on here, and we're beginning to see some of it. This I.G. Horowitz's report, the Inspector General of the Justice Department, we'll have to wait and see what we learn from that, whether he goes down as far as he needs to go or whether he pulls his punches. So I'm waiting to see that report. I've put a lot of people on notice that with the crimes I see that are extensive, we'll see if Horowitz sees the same crimes. If he doesn't go far enough, there's one thing we have to do. If he goes where he should go, a lot of people are going to be spending a lot of time, perhaps the rest of their lives, in prison.
Well, Charles, I think we want to thank you for the hard work you've done. It's been eye-opening. I think you've internationally done a great service to people who care about justice and the truth. And so personally, I want to thank you once again, and thank you publicly for your persistence, intelligence, and hard work to bring all this to light. Thank you for exposing the criminal nature of the Clinton Foundation and its ties to country like Ireland. And hopefully people listening can begin to take action, understand what's at stake here, and demand that justice be served.
100%, Dr. Corsi. 100%, Dr. Corsi. And with that, I'd like to just say thank you to both my guests for joining up. I know I didn't have an awful lot to say, but I'm sure you'll understand that both our guests come with a wealth of information. Everything is sourceable information. You just go online, check it through, have a re-listen through the broadcast. I'll ask you for my part to like and subscribe, press the little blue bell so you'll get reminders for little other shows. I'd like to give a big shout out to the 24/7 live stream team over there and all the moderators that work there and all the Discord members. I'm not going to list you individually. And I'd also like to say to my Irish viewing audience that you can look into these sourceable information. You can check this out for yourself because there's a lot of startling changes about to arrive on our shores that we need to be prepared for and aware of. And this platform, among with any others here in Ireland, will help share, and hopefully we can start bringing some much wanted need and attention to these nefarious actions. With that, Dr. Corsi, thank you very much for joining me here in the Grand Torino. I would like to thank Charles Ortel for his sterling work, and I'd add my public admiration for his work and all his transitional work. I've seen him through all the shows, through Alex Jones, through Lionel Nation, and I'd also like to push people towards Dr. Corsi's show on YouTube. I was going to say RTE on the YouTube. That is Coffee and Freedom. Look out for that show. Wonderful shows. That's with Pammy and Brainstorm and all the wonderful researchers there in the Discord. And with that, guys, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this interview. I think this is going to be hopefully this will go down as one of the first movements into shaking the grip of a very insidious and nefarious cult that seems to be dwelling amongst us. Thank you, Dr. Corsi, and thank you very much, Mr. Charles Ortel.
Thank you for presenting the opportunity to bring this forward and the courage to get this out there. And we greatly appreciate your efforts as well.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Take care, sir. Talk to you all soon. I'm going to... And we will be...